Welcome, welcome. Hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. Welcome to Acadia After Dark. I'm the host, Reverend Rev Reed. Snowy week up here in Acadia. We had plenty of warning on it, and apparently the power company was prepared because we didn't even lose power out here. I was surprised. Last few times we've had storms, we lost it for a day or two, so it was a nice change. Kept us running, everything on schedule for Christmas. Hope everybody had a fun, safe, happy holiday. I know we did. We didn't do a lot, but we enjoyed ourselves. We did have, I had a customary turkey leg. But aside from that, it was a pretty low key Christmas. We just chilled out. Grandparents came down and visit and had a good time. But we did release a new episode of Acadia After Dark on Monday. Did pretty well. I'm happy to see people are enjoying it. It was the highest viewed one we've ever done. Didn't have as many interactions, but it had the highest view count. We discussed the Kiwakwa, basically Maine's wendigo. Comes out of Wabanaki folklore, although it's mentioned in pretty much all the tribes that inhabited the Northeast. Maine in particular, I like to say it's Maine's scariest cryptid because it's definitely a pretty terrifying idea. A creature that not only can consume you, but consumes your soul in the process. That's pretty diabolical. But we definitely have a shorter episode this week because honestly, in a holiday week, the news has been light. We haven't had a lot going on this week that I thought was too interesting. Of course, we're getting ready for the end of the year, so that is stuff to talk about when it comes to end of year things. Share my thoughts on my favorite horror movies for the year. If anybody has gotten to watch some horror movies this year, I've been enjoying it. It's actually been a pretty good year for it. Compared to the last few, I thought were lacking. At least as far as movies, anyways. There were some good series the last few years, but this year was definitely the return of classic horror movies, in my opinion. I haven't gotten to see Nosferatu. That one I'm hearing a lot of good things about. I've only heard one or two people that said that it was bad, so that's a pretty good sign. Nowadays, if it was bad, people would have been calling it out up pretty much immediately. So, yeah, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about the episode from this week, which I thought was a pretty fun one. We had a whole new set of things I was trying out. Did some audio stuff. That was my attempt at basically trying to put on a little bit of an audio drama for y'all. Hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, and I'm planning to do more of that sort of stuff in the future. Playing around with some different programs and some different ways of recording to see if I can get something out of it. But it's something I want to pursue further as far as the narrative going forward. I'm going to keep doing that style that we did at the beginning of the last few episodes where we'll have a portion that'll be a fictional story and then going into more realistic historical accounts and things like that. I thought that was a fun way to kind of break up the episodes. But let me know if you don't, if you don't jive with you on one way or the other, because honestly, it's a fun thing for me. But if there's things we can do better, we're willing to consider. Anyways, when the whole thing with the Wendigo came up, I was looking for something that was winter themed, honestly. And even though one of my favorite cryptids of this type of year, Krampus, is obviously a obvious topic, I wanted to do something that was more specific to Maine for this first Christmas of the show. So I chose the Kawakwa, which is basically the Wabanaki version of a Wendigo. And they inhabited the region known as Acadia down eastern Maine, um, pretty much up until the last couple of centuries when well, they still have a pretty large presence, and luckily Maine has come a long ways in trying to make things right. We're not going to get into too much specifics on that right now, but either way, there was definitely a lot. We call it the Dawnland. And I know the radio station that I work at, they recognize that every morning on the broadcast. They even have a whole portion of the show that is dedicated to indigenous news and things like that. So it's definitely a big part of the culture up here. And when you're talking about like the folklore and the legends and stuff, it's like a lot of what you're going to find in the history books here are going to be the stuff that comes from the historical origins of the colonial era. So we're talking like 1600s onward, right? But there's definitely a lot more history that far predates that. And I want to tap into that. I'm starting to find more sources for that sort of stuff, so I'm definitely interested on hearing more legends from actual Wabanaki people and things like that, because it's definitely hard to pin down specific sources. If you look up a lot of stuff on this stuff, at least as far as the internet and a lot of books, they'll refer to legends, but they won't say who it was specifically that was telling the legends. So it takes some backtracking to find. I know, like Chris Packard had mentioned the Wendigo in his book as well as the Kawakwa. I think he mentioned them as two separate things, which they definitely are. Separate in their own ways. I guess the biggest description changes when it comes to the Wendigo versus the Kawakwa. The Kawakwa is more robust. It's not sickly in the way that a Wendigo is. A Wendigo looks like it's desiccated. It looks like it's like kind of drawn and skinny usually, almost to the point of looking like it's undead in the way they're mostly depicted. That comes from insatiable hunger where they're like basically eating themselves because they can't eat enough to continue, sustaining themselves. And that's slightly different than the Kawakwa, because the Kawakwa seems to definitely eat more out of uh, just desire for destruction or just desire to consume. It's not so much that it feels hunger. It just is its reaction to anything that almost anything that it comes across, it'll try and eat, from what the folklore says, right? So you're talking animals, you're talking people, and essentially when you're talking to a Kawakwa that is transformed from a human into this like feral creature or whatever, at first they're depicted as being human size, but then over time, as they consume other things, they grow. Similar to the Wendigo, except the Wendigo, it doesn't grow stronger, it only grows larger. Where the Kawakwa theoretically can just continue to grow larger and larger as long as it continues to consume. And they're depicted as being anywhere from 8 feet to, I've seen legends where they were talking 12 to 15 feet in some stories, to the size that they were like almost like reaching up into the trees, right? And there's a lot of interesting like depictions of it where they would almost be like hiding amongst the trees because they're this large creature that you would look into the woods and where your normal line of vision would be looking straight ahead into the trees. Instead, you would be seeing a leg. So that would look like a tree trunk, right? And instead, the actual creature is above that and would reach down and like grab the people. And some larger, cryptids that I've heard them talk about in, other areas of the world didn't seem to be as bloodthirsty as these are. These are just kind of known to just want to destroy and consume, and that's their only goal. Now, the Wendigo is also like again well known, and that's definitely been featured in stories more in colonial folklore up here, and it was common amongst the logging communities and things like that back in the I'd say 1800s or so in Maine, anyways. And there was discussion of that because obviously when you're talking a lot of the logging areas were 3 to 4 hours north of Bangor, so you're getting into some pretty remote territory. And when you're talking about driving down these logging roads, or if you were out at a camp, you'd be out there for weeks at a time in the winter, completely isolated. If a storm came in, well, that you were pretty much on your own. So the thought of hunger was always on people's minds, I'm sure. And if you were out there for a few weeks at a time, yeah, they had provisions and they could all hunt, and everybody there had plenty of experience in dealing with these situations, but that didn't stop them from, at times, obviously, in other parts of the country, we've had incidents, other parts of the world, obviously, things have happened. So it's not a far cry to believe that there was always that fear in the back of people's minds. And then when you add in the whole idea that, oh, well, there's actually a supernatural element to it, which, as I discussed on the episode Monday, it's more of a way of just kind of making themselves disassociate from the actual reality of it in some situations. But that's not to say that there couldn't be something, right? Because there's definitely legends around the world, and especially in North America in particular. There's so many legends of just the same creatures being described, like I said in the episode, whether it be a wendigo or a kiwakwa by one name. You could even kind of say the Sasquatch resembles somewhat what a Kawakwa's description is, right? Because it's got the hair, it's large. A particularly violent Sasquatch breed could be something to consider there, right? Wouldn't be something that's necessarily supernatural, like it was a human that was turned into that, but that's not to say there couldn't be some other type of hominid that was just particularly aggressive or violent. And some of the earliest accounts in Maine were talking about the fact that like Sasquatches were violent. The original pine apes that they used to talk about would throw trees and stuff like that at loggers. And that was kind of one of those things that, yeah, obviously it's a way of describing something that occurs, right? We can look back and we can say they were probably relating, oh, well, this tree fell on Jim, and this is why. Now, is it easier to say, well, it was bad luck, or the wind blew the wrong way, or somebody made a bad cut, made a mistake, and it fell? Or is it easier to say, oh, well, a Sasquatch did it when you go home and explain it to Jim's wife, right? So I can definitely understand where the stories come up from, but also these stories went across the world and across this country as far as Yetis, Wendigos, Sasquatch, Sasket, Chenoo, all these different names for essentially the same type of hominids, a divergence from human. That's what most people, I would think, agree nowadays. I don't think there's a lot of people that are still trying to say it's something supernatural necessarily, but to say that it's not some larger primate or something that's just a divergence of humanity in some way or another isn't outside the realm of possibility. And if it's going to be there, it would be, I say, in Maine, because I believe, we have 85% woodland restoration from what we had pre-colonial or pre-industrial era, right? So basically, that's to say that out of all the trees that we removed, 85% of them have been regrown in this state, which is great. I think most other states average around, like, the higher ones are like 45 to 50%, and Maine crushes it. I think the next highest might be California or New Jersey, because New Jersey has a surprising amount of trees. You wouldn't think it, right? If you don't live there, you haven't driven through there, you probably wouldn't realize how much it does have, but it's true. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna do more research on the Chinoo, the skinwalkers. Well, it's kind of like a skinwalker relation, right? Because there was some aspect of the transformation. Obviously, this wasn't at will, but the fact that it was cursed and then used dark magic or something like that, I felt there was some relation. Either way, it was just kind of an interesting story, the way that it was told originally versus what then you look it up more and more, there's more relation to other stuff, and you can definitely see how it evolved over the years to now. I would almost say that after the 1600s or so was definitely the peak of Kawakwa um, folklore, and then after that, it was kind of overtaken by Sasquatch and Wendigo. Now, Sasquatch didn't come around until obviously the modern, 1900s, 1800s, probably. There were stories of wild men in the woods, pine apes, as they were called in Maine. We'll do a later episode on like pine apes and Sasquatch in Maine specifically, because that kind of deserves its own discussion. But the winter months always make me think of Wendigo. It's just the way that my head works when it comes to that. So I wanted to do one at least that would cover something like that. And the Kawakwa was one that I discovered when we were researching the Palmyra Wolves episode, actually. So it's a relatively new subject to me, but definitely one of my favorite new cryptids, I think. Uh, just the idea of something like that, that actually not only is it this feral creature, but that it was something that predated man. It's something that comes from our primordial era, and still kind of instills that same terror, because that whole uncanny valley thing, that it's almost human but not quite. I always love that stuff. So to hear something like that specifically rates to Maine and Acadia in particular, obviously being Wabanaki land, that's Kawakwa territory, right? So we're going a little late now, so I'm gonna move right on to the next thing. I think we're gonna talk about my favorite horror movie of the year. Well, there was three essentially, right? Because I can't say which one I think was my favorite without at least discussing them each. Because the first one that comes to mind when I'm thinking of best horror movies that I saw. Now, they may have not debuted in 2024, but my favorites that I saw, right? So, I think number one that comes to mind was Late Night with the Devil. And when I first heard of that movie, just the title alone really struck a chord with me. That's absolutely my vibe. And then seeing the movie and the way that they built suspense throughout, I thought it was really cool. That was just there was so many things done right in that movie that I could not say enough good things. Now, when I brought it up to somebody at one point, they were like, "Oh, well, it's not really a horror movie," and I'm like, "Well, it feels like a horror movie to me, right? Because you're definitely dealing with some type of there's blood and gore, great practical effects in that movie. Also, just cool visuals throughout. And then there's also this like supernatural satanic element to it. I loved it. It was so cool. Then after that one, I think the next one that I kind of have to look at this year as being among the best, not only this year but just in general, Alien Romulus. That movie, just what a roller coaster. I've seen people say that they wanted that to be shorter or they wanted things different. I don't know about those people, but I think generally that's got to be the best Alien movie I've seen. Maybe short of the original. I know that's saying a lot. Actually, I might say that the original and second one might be slightly better. But listen, that movie, if they could have made this movie 20 years ago, it would have revolutionized the way people thought about a lot of things. And to see the way that this movie was done this year, I was just so happy to see people receive it so well, so many good things. And it gave me a lot of faith because I was like, well, at some point they're gonna miss, right? Because Alien's pretty consistent. But now I think that kind of breathed new life into it, same way that Prey did for Predator. It feels like we're hitting a new era of those type of movies that I was a fan growing up of Alien. I saw that way too young. I was probably 4 when I saw the Alien movies, and then I was like buying the action figures and stuff, which isn't that weird that they marketed like action figures from like specifically that horror movie. I don't know how many kids were buying those back then, but I was. And that seems kind of strange, right? Same with Predator. I had all of the Predator figures, and I watched them when I was like 5 years old. Those movies were absolutely not meant for me, but they had action figures, and by a lot of people's logic, if there are toys of it or there are action figures of it, well, then it must be for kids. Which, looking back now, is pretty fucked up. But at the time, made perfect sense, and it was cool as hell to me because I love the shit. That probably explains a lot of things now. Either way, the whole thing with the next Alien movie, whatever the direction they take it with, is it's gonna have a lot of hype behind it, but it's also gonna have to somehow manage to exceed. And I don't know where you could go from here that's gonna top that. I'm trying to be spoiler light because I don't want to blindside people randomly on a paranormal podcast with specifics about horror movies. Though, if people do want to hear like more like movie thoughts or something like that, absolutely draw me a comment or something. Let me know what you think. Uh, wouldn't mind doing reviews or something. Maybe that'd be cool. The last one that I think is actually the more that I think of it, the more it is my favorite horror movie of the year. And it was a surprise to me because I didn't originally like the first one. But I think it's Smile 2. The first one, when I watched it the first time, it did not hit me right. That first scene, I was like, oh, okay. And then after that, it kind of flatlined. And sadly, I felt a little bored of it. Then right after Smile 2 hit the theaters, we watched it again. And sitting down and watching it that second time, it hit a lot differently and felt a little. It was something I was missing before clicked, right? So then, pretty much immediately, almost like a week, 2 weeks later, we're able to watch Smile 2. And that one just all the right notes. Just such a fun from start to finish. Just cool stuff, shocking, edge of your seat stuff. I can't say enough good things about the acting by the main actor. Don't know who did the music in that, but actually, that whole way that that was done was just so cool. Of course, I was calling a lot of the stuff towards the end because I knew, like, after you understand how the demon works, you kind of get how the demon works. But then the end of that movie, I can't say enough good things about it. It was so spectacular. I loved that. I thought that was such an awesome way to end that out. I don't think you can follow that up. Like, you don't, you can't, without it being a prequel. I think that's the only thing you can do in that franchise from there. And sorry if you want to see more of it, yeah, I could. I don't know. How do you get more from that, right? That's kind of the. But either way, it was just such a cool movie, and I can't say enough good things because honestly, I haven't seen one like that before. The creature in it was so cool. If you've seen it in the first one, they've just expanded on it so much more. Just such an awesome little thing that it's just turned into this whole other franchise. Now, one other thing I want to say, and this is a hot take, but there's probably going to be people that are like, oh, how did Terrifier 3 not make your list? And here's why. Is because I did not watch the original Terrifier movie until this year. And it didn't hit for me, so I didn't want to rush into 3. So what I want to do is I want to give it more time. I'll probably watch it eventually, probably in 2025. But there was so many other good horror movies this year that quite frankly, I just didn't feel I had enough in me. I only watch a handful of movies a year anyways in theaters. I have only seen one, I think, in the last 2 years. So if I don't go into a theater and see it, when it comes to streaming services, it gets added to my list and then I catch up on it. I didn't even really honestly mean to not watch it. It was not an intentional thing. It was just kind of the amount of movies that come out in a chosen year are too many for me to watch in one go. And I know people that watch 3, 4, 500 movies a year. I cannot do it. I have too many other hobbies. I spent my whole day today playing Marvel Rivals when I should have been reading, and I'm probably gonna be up half the night reading instead because I know I should have been. But that's okay. I'll make do. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and say goodbye for this week. I hope everybody had a happy holiday. I will be back with you next week. It'll be Thursday, so what we'll have that day will actually be kind of a special episode. So next week on the 2nd, I am going to be interviewing somebody from Acadia Ghost Tours, the Bar Harbor Ghost Tours specifically, actually. So I'm going to be interviewing them, and we're going to have an episode shortly after that that's going to be covering the hauntings of Bar Harbor. And I wanted to see if I could get anybody else on here to talk about it. Of course, I'm going to be pre-recording that interview, but we'll probably play some of it here on the podcast for y'all to hear while I'm working out some of the stuff on the script and everything. Well, if you have enjoyed the podcast, please go up and drop a rating if you're listening on Spotify. If you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and like, subscribe. Don't want to miss another one, you can hit that bell icon. I'll be back with you next Thursday, and of course, new episodes every Monday. We've got 2 more episodes this season. Next week will be a fun one. It's more of a speculative one. And then we're going to have a big end of series blowout that'll probably be kind of a series of ghost stories, because we're going to be talking about Bar Harbor for the last one. Of course, Acadia being what it is, only be appropriate. So, anyways, I hope everybody had a great Christmas. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for supporting the show this year. The last few months have been fun. Met a lot of cool people talking about spooky shit online. And I hope to continue in 2025. I'd like to hear more. I'm learning a lot about just stuff in my own backyard, and that's really cool. Hope you're enjoying it too. Anyways, y'all have a good one. I'll see you next